All right. Welcome to this week's episode of KUDEN Radio. Dai-shihan Miller here from Warrior Concepts here in East Central Pennsylvania. Dojos in Selinsgrove, my home office where I normally do this stuff out of, is about, 10 minutes away. Anyway, so welcome. We are going to be taking a look at something that bridges, right, the personal development side of things with we'll talk more about overt tactics and hidden tactics and things like that. The ninja's boryaku, right? Boryaku, which is normally translated as strategy, but again, you hear that sucking through the teeth. The Japanese do that when things are difficult. So anyway, been thinking about this stuff quite a bit, and my focus is really on getting folks to understand the difference between Budo and Bushido and Ninjutsu, specifically Ninpo, right? And there's references in the scrolls, in certain references that I have, specifically saying this is the Ninpo of Ninjutsu, right? So a lot of these things really throw folks off. And you can certainly do whatever you want, right? I mean, this podcast is kind of a broad spectrum, right, to help folks understand strategies and tactics and things like that, but more geared toward us, right? Levels of understanding and personal development, the seishin, that kind of thing, which I'll talk about here a little bit more in a minute. But it also, is the springboard, right, for folks that want the gamut, right? Hopefully across the week we have recovering, right? The shinden, the kokoro, right? The shinden, which is personal development, that kind of thing. The kuden, which tends to lean toward knowledge and those kind of things, but it affects everything, right? Battlefield and our own life mastery. And then the taiden, right, which is again what really attracts most people, because there's that fantasy, right, that the movies have helped and the books have helped, and the lone warrior taking out a hotel full of Uzi carrying mafia, right? So anyway, but we're going to dive into this. We're going to take a look at we're going to look at boryaku again from the ninja's perspective, and why this is what it is, as opposed to, on some lists you'll see, instead of boryaku, what you'll see is heiho, which is something different, right? That's more on the bushi, right, or the Bushido side of things. But again, it's not like the ninja didn't have those, right? So anyway, we'll dive into more of this and hopefully make it a little bit more clear. But what I'm also hoping is that it's much more expansive, right? So we'll take a look at that during this episode as soon as we get back. So the big question is this: how are self-defense and success-minded people like us, concerned citizens worried about protecting ourselves, our loved ones, and the things we care about from the monsters we know exist in the world? How do we train in a way that gives us the skills, knowledge, and understanding we need without becoming paranoid fighters or killers ourselves, and yet still allows us to be the hero protector the world needs us to be? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Jeffrey Miller, and welcome to KUDEN Radio. All right, that's still my story. Right, I've got James in the wings, Sensei Alexander, for those of you who are in the system or in our programs and need to be respectful of your instructors. I know there's lots of folks across the art and the organization that shifted to and are more than happy with things being on a first name basis and whatnot, and that's fine, right? I understand, that's why they do it in Japan. They call everybody by their first name and they add san to it and whatnot. Yeah, there's still that respectfulness to it, but the Japanese, and this really points to a ninjutsu perspective, because in Bushi martial arts, right? The ones that are more on the Bushido side, they're not calling people by first names, right? Students are not calling instructors by first names. But this really points to the expediency and adaptability, skillful means of the Japanese instructors who many decades ago, right, adapted to calling Westerners by first name. And it was only because that's what we were doing, right? We had come out of the era of, formalities. And I talk to kids coming into classes now, and the whole idea of why they would call somebody sir or ma'am, they have no clue. They don't get it, right? Because it's getting so far away from things that and I get it, right? I hear the voices, the voices in my head. No, I hear the voices that come to me through email or people answering certain questions or just tossing shit to the side because that's the old way of doing things and we don't do things like that anymore. Well, maybe that's the reason why more people are fucking depressed and not, they don't have their shit together and there's less people that are successful. Maybe, I don't know. But what most people miss is, well, the Japanese instructors call everybody by their first name. Yeah, but they still tack san onto it. So it's not Mida-san, it's Jeff-san. It's still Mr. Jeff, Miss Angie, Miss whatever, right? So again, here's this. I hear what I want to hear, and therefore, right? So, and then when I take my students to Japan, and they say sir, or they say, they use one of the teaching titles, or Mr. Miller, or whatever. I've had teachers, turn around, not Japanese, right? None of them say anything, and they actually little sidebars, right? Discuss things like, you understand. But somebody will like whip their head around and go, you make your students call you sir. You make your students. Do I make them? No. Here's the rules of the game. Here's the rules of the dojo. And the reason for that is we started out doing the first name basis. And you know what? What I discovered was a lot of students forget that they're students when they do that. Because first name basis, even in Japan, makes you appear not a teacher-student relationship, not a nothing like the martial systems imply, right? Or point to, almost like a parent-child kind of thing. And this doesn't, I'm not saying that my students are children. And again, people hear what they want to hear. People that want to be offended look for reasons to be offended. Okay? So what I found was friends, not students, were always looking for ways to skate the standards for promotion or learning certain skills. Right now, students actually have to admit, I don't like that. I don't want to do that. And I say, I don't care. And you know what? Bad guy doesn't care either. Well, the universe doesn't care. The bad guy actually hopes that you don't learn your stuff to the degree that you need it. He doesn't know what those skills are, but whatever it is that you could learn to screw up his shit, to mess up his ability to harm you, to carry out his strategies and whatnot. Oh, right. He doesn't know what they are, but as long as you're not learning them, fantastic. So if you don't like rolling, fantastic. Shows it to the ground, or he sets it up an ambush, or whatever. Right? You're stepping back into ichimonji, and your foot catches on a slightly raised portion. They make sidewalks in chunks, right? And it has to do with if you make one long run or whatever, they're easily cracked and they don't adjust, and doesn't drain water away, and all kinds of reasons, right? But we've all seen them, right? After a couple of years, they're not level and even, right? Like the people who laid them, set out to do, right? There's water supplies under the ground, vegetation growing. There could be trees that the city planted along the road, along the sidewalk, on the border of the road or whatever. But those roots have to go somewhere, right? So anyway, something kind of, kind of raises up a little bit more, right? So some jackwagon throws something at us. We shift back into Ichimonji and catch the side of our foot on one of these things. And well, at that point, Ichimonji is not the skill. Whatever kata we thought we were going to do, not the skill that's needed, right? And so the universe is kind of cold and impartial, right? And while there are these lessons within the art that point to what I call the boomerang effect, right? Or karma or whatever, where whatever you put out, right, it manifests because you're affecting, right? Modern physics, quantum physics would say you're affecting the quantum field, but you're setting things into motion. But it's also cold and impartial. Like if you're not doing anything or you're not doing the right things to manifest the thing that you want, well, then you're going to get what your actions produce, right? And the universe has gravity, right? So if you trip over something and your sutemi or your ukemi or whatever, right? What do you see? Iki, sometimes it's called. If it sucks, well, the universe has provided us with gravity so that we don't float off somewhere, right? So it's just going to, let the earth hug you for a bit. So, we have what we have. Okay. Why am I discussing these things? Well, first off, before we jump into the topic for today, which is again the ninjas boryaku, right? B-O-Ryaku, boryaku. Again, in most of the books, it's translated as strategy, and it's not that strategy is not there. The whole emphasis is strategy, but what kind? Because again, in Ninjutsu, there is always the omote and the ura, right? The obvious, the overt, right? The stuff that people can see, the stuff that we can all see, right? But then there's always the ura that goes along with it, right? Just like in the omyo, right? The yin and yang, and there's a whole bunch of depths of things. I don't know if you noticed or not, over the last couple of episodes, I've been really hammering on Togakure and Ninjutsu specifically, because at this level where I am and what I'm looking at, and it actually fits in very, very well. I mentioned this during our episode celebrating the new year. This is the year of the wood snake, and this whole realm of Ninjutsu, and since Togakure-Ryu is one of the most robust lineages of Ninjutsu, right? It's not limited to just espionage. It has a battlefield version or side to it. It also has much more subtle things, right? Going through these things. So I am in the process, in all of my extra spare time, right? Writing a book. I've just outlined another book that'll follow that in a couple of, probably 2 months after I release this first one. I'm rereading the Bansen Shukai. I'm rereading the Shuninki. I'm rereading some of these other books that I have by authors that most people don't know anything about, but they're just different approaches to Ninjutsu. And then while it just looks like a book full of pictures with a couple of statements here or there, Hatsumi-Sensei's Complete Ninja, I think is what it's called. But either way, I'm going through these things because all of these things have depth beyond what makes a ninja technique, right? What I want to talk about during this episode is what the hell makes a ninja a ninja. And I put ninja in quotes for those of you who saw the slide or the little meme or whatever that I put out there. What makes a ninja and not just a name that somebody slapped on a blender or a motorcycle or their own little version of things, because from a superficial point of view, that's all they know, right? So, or a teenager saying that's so ninja, right? Anyway, so let me bring up something here. I think, was it last episode, James, I mentioned I was trying to get the new book out by Wednesday. Well, here we are coming up on another Wednesday. So I'm aiming for Wednesday or Thursday of this week. It's not that I haven't been working on things. I've been absolutely working on things, but I decided to add a few other things to the book in the process. And then I also decided to make it, at least part of it, kind of like a workbook. So one of the editions, let me show you the book cover that's worked up already. That will be going out. Just bring this up. I guess I need to share my screen, don't I? Screen, share screen. Why can't I find it? James, where the hell's the share screen? That's not it. That's not it.
Should be right under your window.
Oh, there it is. Okay. I was looking for a colored thing, and it's a screen with an arrow on it. That makes perfect sense to me. I guess it does now. Anyway, all right. So let me see. Bring this up, and there we go. I think it's this one. All right. So, this is one for, actually, let me bring up this. Can you guys see my screen? There we go. There's the clean version.
Yes.
Can you see that?
Yes, sir.
So I want to thank Lee Davis for allowing me to use, he actually sent it in as a testimonial anyway, to use something that he had sent me as a part of this. But I had to work through the artwork and all that to get this thing done. And so when this thing gets released, I think we've got, I don't know, it's going to be like $9 or something like that. And then do I have another one here? I know I do. Where is it? This one, right? So there's an optional program that folks can get if they want it. This one compares, right? The Bushido, right? The 7 virtues that we've talked about in the past, and the ninjas Seishin Teki Kyoyo, right? These spiritual refinement, personal development kind of things. Because often the question comes up, right? What the hell's the difference, right? I mean, is it just like names and titles and whatnot? So, and this is actually, I taught these things to one of my inner circle groups, the group that meets on Friday mornings. And we do these different lessons, different approaches each week. And so I taught it to them first, and then I just need to get that edited so that that's up and ready as well. But it looks at both. And a little spoiler alert: as ninja, we have to know both sides. So this particular program here presents similarities. What it really does, it gives a little bit more history and background, not a lot, but a little bit more history and background on the 7 virtues, because a lot of us have posters, or you've seen it in books or whatever, right? And there are a couple of, I'm going to call them standardized lists that are floating around. But what I wanted everybody to make sure they understood was that those lists are not like set in stone. Okay. As a matter of fact, when folks go through, when they, and I have part of this, let me just bring it back here. Part of this in the Seishin Teki Kyoyo book. So one of the editions was after I did covered 11 different training areas, skill sets, whatever you want to call these things, principles. And I'm sticking to ones that won't scare folks, because a lot of folks that are kind of tentative about things, they're concerned about, violating religious vows or precepts or whatever, right? So make it very clear in the book that, we're not going to be discussing enkyo, like divination stuff and esoteric teachings and nikkyo and whatnot that could be a part of the Seishin Teki Kyoyo as well. Kuji, the Goshinbo, those kind of things, psychological self-protection, working your world from a distance, those kind of things that are all a part of these things. I don't have those in. I have things that are more base level where they will work in life, right? Obviously, but they also improve our abilities on the battlefields and back alleys as well. So there's 11 Seishin areas of focus in this book, and then I got through with that section and thought, shit, there could be confusion, right? Like, how is this different from those 7 virtues? So there's just a quick section in here that that kind of explains things a little bit, right? And the perspective, right? There's an external, internal perspective kind of thing going on. I do make a mention that as ninja, we're responsible for both sides, but how they're applied, right? How the bushi would apply the 7 virtues, not the same reasons that a ninja would apply them. Okay, I don't mean this necessarily nefarious reasons, could be, but generally not, right? But the list that's in the book here, right, is not exactly the same as the one that a lot of folks may have. And so there's a little bit in here about how, different times, different eras, those lists of 7 might not have been 7. It might have been 14. It might have been 4, depending on a lot of different factors, right? Religious or philosophical influences during the time, whether or not it was the daimyos, right, the regional lord that the samurai worked for, that it was their decision, that they decided these were the important virtues, or cultural expectations, things like that, right? So I want to make sure that was there. Now it's just kind of it's a addition to the book, but I really go into that much more deeply in the other program, right? The Inner Path, Outer Code program. So anyway, so I've kind of added on to things, and the other addition was in the Seishin Teki book, instead of just laying out these things, and they're very brief, right? Because this is not designed to be a guide where students get an introduction to, as opposed to like a full-on academic book or whatever, right? So what I wanted was something that you could take and like, usually people just see the Seishin Teki Kyoyo as a single line item on the 18 levels of ninja training, or the 18 skill areas within Togakure-Ryu. And so, great, okay, but what the hell's in there, right? Spiritual refinement, personal development. What does that mean, right? Those are big ass blanket statements, right? What am I working on to produce this in this direction to become a ninja, and not just, a warrior that, who knows, right, cheats or whatever, right? So what I decided to do was, originally, right, the idea was, let me just close this out of here. So originally the idea was to, let me stop sharing that, to offer a self-defense example of how it might be applied, how any one of those areas might be applied, and then a life or success example of how they might be applied. Okay. Oh, and by the way, I'm using the Boryaku ninja's principles, the strategy principles, in laying this out. Okay. Because once you understand this from a ninja's perspective, everything is strategy. Everything is everything comes out of the Seishin, and the boryaku, everything. Right. So often while it's listed, and it's a neat exercise to go through it, which is what we're going to do tonight, to understand what kind of overt tactics, which you might have read about, what kind of not so obvious tactics, right? But I have a hidden agenda, okay, which is part of the boryaku, right? But what I decided to do was add a practical exercise to the book, and then there's like a note area in each section, and then there's like 3 prompting questions, or not really questions, but little subsets that a student that's really trying to work on this stuff can actually, take notes, right? One of those 3 on each one is insights, right? So, and then there's kind of a leading question, but there's a practical exercise that you could start doing the day you're reading it, or start at the very next day, depending on which one and what the exercise is, to start gaining results, right? So, like I said, I decided to do that. That's fleshing things out a little bit more. And then to make it more of I know it's a book, it's a guide. I mean, it's not going to be more than 20, 30 pages, maybe 20, 25 pages, which seems like, well, shit, Sensei, it's a really short book. Yeah, I know, but there's a lot to work on. But what I decided to do was also create 2 other resources that if anybody that gets the book will by default get the resources. Again, the program is optional. That's just an expansion on the differences between, right, the Bushi perspective and the Ninpo perspective, because the virtues and the seishin qualities, there are certain ones that overlap, right? And so people could look at that and go, well, to me, it looks like it's the same. Yeah, but there's a chart in the book that kind of points in the right direction. Not kind of. It's just a very paraphrased kind of thing to help folks get it. In the program, I go into it much more deeply, as far as how a samurai or how a ninja would think about those qualities and why, right? And why, right? And so. Again, it's like an omyo-do kind of thing, right? There's this yin yang, external influences, internal development to apply or work with external. Right? Again, very deep stuff. But this is strategy, and it's the difference between learning techniques and holding on to those techniques and aiming for a higher level that Hatsumi-Sensei has always been pointing to, right? This level of void, this return to zero kind of thing. So 2 resources. One is something of a challenge for a given amount of time. I'm not letting all the cat out of the bag. And one is a quick cheat sheet kind of thing to, assess where you are and what might be the next important thing to work on or whatever. Right. So anyway, I added more work for myself, but my goal is to make it less a book containing a topic of potential interest. Oh, that's neat. Instead of that, turning it into something that is actually part of a training course, right? That it's a proactive kind of thing. So yes, part of it is book-ish. Part of it is workbook-ish. So there's information, but there's also stuff to work on. And then there's also leaping off points. Okay. So again, the strategy behind it, rather than me just doing a data dump just to write a book that hopefully people can use or want. Right. So anyway, all right. So before we jump into the discussion on the boryaku, the ninja's approach to strategy, what that really means, how that compares to the samurai's heiho, And I didn't say, hey ho, what's up? No, hey ho, Heiho. Okay. And sometimes it's Heihou, or you'll see it in Romaji, right? Western letters, Heiho, and then the O would have a horizontal bar over it. That either the U at the end of the O or the horizontal bar over just the O, no U, are two different conversion systems to help Western speakers use Romaji, our writing system, right, to be able to read and speak Japanese properly. Okay, so that U at the end just tells you to hold the O twice as long, or they'll put a horizontal bar over the O that tells you to hold the horizontal bar. Just like if you see two consonant, the same consonant next to each other, like in the ninja. Juhake, right? The 18 skill training areas, right? Hake, right? The Juhake, right? Hake is a contraction of 8 areas, that kind of thing, right? What you're really looking at is Juhachi. And then in Mikyo, we would just say Juhachi Do. Okay? So 18, Juhachi, 10 and 8 is 18. 18, Do, methods, techniques, ways, that kind of thing, right? When this stuff was all formulated, they chose Ninja Juhake, right? Just like there's the Budo Juhake, 18 skill areas of Bushi, right? Samurai. So in that those two K's that go next to each other, and it's a contraction, but you're going to hold that K sound twice as long. So it's not Juhake, it's Juhake, right? And there's things with inflection and whatnot, but you just hold a little bit longer. Just like in English, if we were to say that, my friend has some farmland and it's level, right? So we're just paraphrasing it, right? So that over there, that's very hilly. That over there is that level land over there, right? Level land, right? We just hold the L longer. We do it, right? It's not level land, right? It's level land, right? That level land over there, just there's a kind of a hold on it. So Juhake is the same way, right? Just like the Kion Happo, okay? Not Kion Happo. It's not Happo. It's Happo. Kion Happo. Okay? Anyway, there's your Japanese lesson for the episode. We can go now. What do you think, James? That's it. Never. Oh no, sorry. We're supposed to be talking about strategy. Anyway, who do we have on? What's going on? I see numbers going up, and this must be, I don't know, must be a hot topic based on what people read into it, or the snowstorm has more locals signed on, or whatever. So who's on?
I don't know about local, but we have Carl and Greg on.
Holy shit!
Australia.
Holy, 2 people. We just doubled our normal from Australia. But you guys need some sleep or something? No?
They need some of our weather, because Greg said it was 92 where he's at, and Carl said in Perth it was 111.
Yeah. Winter is when we think of winter, we think of brr, right? They think of winter, they think of fucking extra air conditioners.
Dave's on, said
which has always made me wonder about how Santa shows up, like in flip flops and shorts and or cargo pants and sleds pulled by a dingo or whatever. Who else is on? Dave. Okay, Dave. Yeah.
Dave's on, said he's got 10 in Montana, so we're not far off from that right now.
Yeah, it's going to hit single digits here. Was it? I don't know what it's doing tonight, but there's 3 nights where it's like dipping, and I think one of the nights is going to be -2. Yeah, friggin' A.
Yeah, Merrill Burnett, Jared, Richard.
Awesome. Welcome, everybody.
Trinity.
Awesome.
looks like it for the ones that have signed on so far.
Okay, cool. All right. So, anything else? Are there any admin things that I need to toss out? I have the tentative dates for spring and fall camp, but I didn't lock them in yet. Okay. I did just lock a date in. February 22nd is a Saturday, and that afternoon, at least one of my guys, unless I throw some other people under the bus, is testing for his Shodan. I had 3, and was it 2 that took time off? Yeah, 2 took time off. And so then there was one, as one of my favorite mystery authors, Agatha Christie, has. Yeah, we're gonna do that. Because of the way the freaking years are falling, it's probably gonna happen for a couple of years here. Normally we do our Daikomyo side the first full weekend after the new year. But this year the holidays were on Wednesday. Next year, and it's just the way it rotates, the way the Gregorian calendar works out. Unless there's a leap year that throws things off. Next year, it's on a Thursday. The year after that, it's on a Friday, right? So again, like I said, unless a leap year throws it off, we're probably not going to be back on the first one immediately after for a while because of holidays and vacations and whatnot. And I try to be a lot of my students and the people that are helping me with things, right? Okay, why'd you pick that one? Because in every other year it's this, because all they're doing is looking at dates. I'm looking at relationships, and I'm looking at activities that people may or may not be involved in because of what's going on around that, right? So like one of the dates that I was considering for, I think it was spring camp, it was wide open on my calendar, but it's Mother's Day weekend. So guys are typically not married guys are typically, well, even the single guys, typically not showing up for a seminar because, don't want to disappoint mom, don't want to disappoint honey, that kind of thing. So, so again, just kind of strategically placing things on. But again, back with Daikomyo side, that one is set in stone. So that one, the dates are almost exactly like they were this year. So, just to confirm here, if you're planning on making it, 9th, 10th, and 11th of January 2026 is our Daikomyo Sai. And then this week, I will have the dates for spring camp and fall camp so people can start, planning and getting all that stuff together. What else? People are pestering me about a Japan trip, so I'm going to have to take a look at that stuff and see if we can't make something happen. I've got a bunch of stuff scheduled in the fall, but I've got to see if we can't squeeze 2 weeks out, because that's normally our trip. Folks can do 1 week or the other out of the trip, but that's all I allow for because I meet people at the airport and make sure that they get their JR pass and all kinds of things. I'm not the guy that just like toss out some instructions here and go, hey, good luck. I know you've never been here before, but hey, because that's part of my job when I take folks over. But anybody that can do the 2 week, it's usually a 13-day experience, I think, including the flights and airfare. We're not just training at the dojo or the dojo, plural, right? There's also trips to Togakushi Mountain, to the shrines, to the Ninja Museum that Hatsumi-Sensei donated a bunch of stuff that he got from Takama-Sensei. We go to some castles and temples and things like that that are central to our lineages in one way or the other, so that folks are getting a total immersion in things and not just, hey, let's go do some more physical techniques, right? And then have bragging rights. I mean, you're going to have bragging rights anyway. But anyway, we'll see how that works out. I think that's it. unless you've got something else that I don't know about.
No, sir.
Okie dokie. See, there's that sir thing again. Irritates people in Japan. You make your students call you sir. Well, see, when we switch to that whole respectful kind of thing, right? Most of the people stopped asking a friend, for those of you on audio only, I just made air quotes, for the allowance to get over on standards and training areas and stuff like that. And they carry themselves differently, right? There becomes like a more professional mind. And there's less acceptance or leaning into mediocrity, right? Besides, I mean, shit, if you wanted to be average, why the hell would you be doing something like ninjutsu? Anyway, so if that's it, I'm going to shift gears then. Is that good? We're good? Okay, awesome. Okay. So the first thing that I really want to say when it comes to this boryaku and this strategy, we'll define it here in a minute. But the first thing I want to say is that for most students in the Bujinkan, most students in Ninjutsu, the boryaku is not typically taught overtly. In the context of like warfare and gang violence, or even for like riot cops to handle, or government agencies and things like that. It's now, again, there are some overt things, and there are subtle things. Most students gravitate toward and recognize the overt things, and most teachers, I think, point those things out. But this stuff is so intertwined with everything that we do that when you understand like the ninpo of ninjutsu, you can't not do it. You just it's just there, right? So boryaku itself, again, I know it's normally translated as strategy, but there's some wild ass other translations for this term, right? One of them is conspiracy. Well, that sounds screwy, right? It's conspiring too. But that's one type. So if we could look at these definitions and see them as applications, okay? So other words that go along with boryaku is, again, conspiracy, plot, strategy, stratagem. It points to a type of planning, and there's a sense of flexible application. Okay, that's not a direct quote, but again, with a lot of things in Japanese, especially if you're looking at the kanji, right? Because if you try to get things translated through Google Translate, which really is on the low end of quality translation, but if you go to some of the Japanese language learning sites where you can type in the kanji or sometimes the romaji, and get a more general across the board how the Japanese would see things, it can point in certain areas, right? But the boryaku also is more of a it was imported, right, from China. Okay, so yes, there's a strategy, or yes, there's a type of strategy, but again, there's a lot of things that are run through. And as I'm teaching more on the Togakure-Ryu, this is one of the reasons why the book, the Seishin Teki Kyoyo book, right, was almost a necessity, so that we can understand this thing that we're supposedly, or that we're sincerely trying to learn, but see, again, I'm at a point in teaching where it's very much like when I put together the program, the Ninja no Hachimon program, which was the first online program I ever did. And that's how, guys like Carl and a bunch of folks got involved through that first program. Because the premise of it was we want to do ninjutsu, but with all the shit flying around, how do we know we're doing like what we're supposed to be doing? What makes ninjutsu, right? Based on ancient litmus tests, right? And while that's, not subjective, it varied based on the schools and how they not how they approach ninjutsu, but which skill areas, right? Did they lean into because of the way they operated and whatnot? Like there were schools that branched off of Togakure. There were schools that popped up just because there was war in a given region, and then when that war was over, it just dissolved, right? But anyway, so when we think of the boryaku, both in our techniques and as battlefield techniques or battlefield strategy, I guess, right? On the overt side, right, we can't start the list without making the first one, the Kyojutsu Tenkan. And again, right, it's not pointed out as a boryaku kind of thing, but right, everything in Ninjutsu is Kyojutsu Tenkan, right? Disguising or the juxtapositioning of truth and falsehood, the manipulation of it to confuse, to frustrate, to bait, to lure, whatever, right? The opponent, the enemy, the other army, whatever, into a bad situation. Okay. James, was it one of the class dojo class? Again, all these things run together. Dojo classes or one of the inner circle classes, or did I cover it? I don't know, Whiteboard Wednesday, KUDEN, whatever. When I said to before you can even approach Kyojutsu Tenkan as a strategy for confusion and whatnot, you had to approach it from the omote, which is, can you distinguish between truth and falsehood? Yeah. Was that in a KUDEN? Was that, again, I teach a lot of classes. Do you
I think
remember?
it might have been a couple things. I think I've heard it here and heard it in class fairly recently as well.
Okay. So yeah, so there's a clarity thing, right? So this comes right out of the Seishin Teki. Not that you're going to see, you are going to see Kyojutsu, not efficient. I don't know if it's on the list that way or not. It's listed a certain way, but it has a different name. It is Shinshi no Michi, right? The path of truth, and then that leads to the Shinobi no Michi, right? The path of the ninja, the path of shinobi. What the hell does that mean, right? But before you can juxtaposition truth and falsehood, you need to make sure you're not blowing smoke up your own ass, and that you're not wrong about something, right? That you can't see things clearly for what they are. Okay, so again, there's levels to these things, but you got the Kyojutsu Tenkan, right? Disguising truth and falsehood. So that shows up in tricks, deception, controlling his perceptions and where he's looking, and those kind of things, right? If we can see those, they're easy, right? But what's harder to see is, and again, we can see it because he sees it, because it overtly does something to break his balance or to to create a downfall, right? But he knows it, right? Very different from something I just taught on here recently, which is matching your kamae to his preferred fight system, right? To his posturing, right? Because right, he's good at that, and he takes up that posture because it allows him to do his power shots or his speed jabs or whatever, right? Much more easily. Okay. So this is all part of like psychological warfare, right? And this also falls under a category in the overt battlefield side, right? That is titled something like eliminating his resources. Okay. So what we're doing is we're basically poisoning the waters. Okay. By the way, as a battlefield tactic, that falls under uh, removing his resources. Okay. So if I uh, send somebody in to do something to the food supply or upstream, because often they would make encampments near water because you need water for everything from cooking to bathing to keeping yourself hydrated and all that kind of stuff, right? So, but if we just go upstream and poison the water, now when we hit the battlefield or when they hit the battlefield against the army that we're working for, they're going to be dehydrated, they're going to be tired, their systems aren't going to be working right, that kind of thing, right? They may also like smell funky and now they're getting sick and whatever. Okay. But the application of matching your kamae to his fight posture, not because it's your favorite, not because you're going to do some cool move from there. You're matching it because it inhibits his ability to do what he is good at, right? So now he has to make adjustments and try to get at you on the fly. He has to try to do what he prefers to do, but he can't do it the way he wants to do it, right? So, or we can we can well, I'll talk about that one in a minute. Okay. So, but again, there are these. Well, this is more on the subtle side. So we can present a strength as a weakness and a weakness as a strength. Okay. So, if I'm not that great at grappling, then I'm going to posture that way. Okay. If I'm injured in a certain area, right, I might lead with that and move as though that's what I'm trying to get him with. So he's going to be worried about it, but he's also going to be worried about what's going to come next. Okay? So sometimes you can hide something right in plain sight. Okay. But if you understand the bigger pictures, then you'll see some of these things in techniques, and sometimes you see them in the bushi, the budo taijutsu kata. But I believe that in this realm, in today's world, because of the synthesizing, right, because of the blending of all of these things with ninjutsu, it's really difficult. And the way Hatsumi-Sensei is taught, it's really difficult to see the budo, right? Unless you're just doing, you're just doing the kata and you're working the sparring off that. But if you're listening to Hatsumi-Sensei and when and how and why you're doing things, or you look at some of the henka that he does, you'll see the transition from budo taijutsu to ninpo taijutsu. And speaking of which, I believe that it's in his Complete Ninja book. It's one of the later ones that he wrote. There's a reference in there about ninpo taijutsu being like, once you transition from budo taijutsu to ninpo taijutsu and you understand the ninpo of that type of taijutsu, a couple of really interesting things happen. One is your options and your control of a situation like drastically increase but the overtness and what it looks like you're doing looks like you have less control. It looks like you have a broken technique. It looks like it's off. It looks weak, right? It's kind of like some of the videos that I've created that were YouTube shorts and things like that, right? Some of those techniques or some of those things are done in a way that it's a quick expedient, but I make no attempt to describe why something works. Or there's even things where my partner's attacking a certain way, or I'm doing something or whatever, where it looks weak. It looks like it wouldn't work, but that's because the person who's looking at it they don't understand the physiology or the timing or whatever that makes that thing work the way it does, so that you could actually have a weak or broken technique, right? You could use less effort, less strength, less speed or whatever, and he's going to break because he's contributing at least 50%, if not more, right? It's my experience that it's 70, 80% or more of the energy and the things, I guess I just use the word things, that are necessary for that to work, right? In Ninpo Taijutsu, right? The goal, and not the goal, it's a skill set, right? To very, very quickly identify the weakest point, right? The weakest point in his structure, the weakest point in his fight style, the weakest point in his technique, the weakest point in his body, very quickly, and then that's where you hone. You don't go after anything else. Okay. So again, once you can see these things, and then you end up in this void realm that we're going to have to circle back to, because I want to stay on track with what I'm doing here, right? So it's very, very interesting things with this, but let's do this before we continue on with this part. Let's contrast Boryaku, right, the ninja's Boryaku, with Heiho. Okay, so Heiho itself is often translated as military strategy. Okay, so it's a type of strategy, but let's see, Hei in this case translates more to it does mean tactics, but it points to, or more implies, like how you use the resources that you have, right? Okay, so, and then whole methods, those kind of things, right? So how do you divvy up your resources? How do you manage your gear? How do you manage the troops that you have, right, to create strength in certain areas or ambush points, or we're going to use certain troops to cut off supply lines. We're going to use certain troops to do direct attacks, whatever. Okay. So this is more in alignment with how do you manage an army? How do you manage a group, keep them fed, make sure that your animals aren't dying, and how do you control the supply lines, all that kind of stuff, right? It's what armies do to this day, right? Again, it's about, and again, this is another way to look at things, and this is part of our development as well when we're coming up through the through our taijutsu training, right? In the early stages of training, the focus is on you, right? When he does this thing, right, you're going to take up this particular posture, you're going to this angle, you're going to come back in, controlling that thing over there so you can deliver this strike. It's about you, right? But that's just to get the basics down. So you learn the movement, you learn striking, you learn weak points, that kind of thing, right? You're getting your head wrapped around the strategy and tactics, and here are examples for how to do that. But you don't outgrow the techniques as much as you understand like the basic strategy. You understand the basic premise, right? Here's how this works, right? Here's how this move causes him to waste effort, right? He's wasting energy, effort, whatever, by missing, right? And then here's how we control him as we enter, take away his options and all that, and then attack a weak point that shuts him down very, very quickly. Okay, cool, got it. All right. So in the beginning, focus is on us, right? That's why you get beginners will say, Sensei, I get all this. I hear you talking about the strategy, but can you just tell me where to put my foot, right? Where in his arm should I hit? That kind of thing, right? And teachers that are either new to it or they've got so much in their head. Hatsumi-Sensei is this way, right? He's admitted over and over and over again over the years that he's not a great teacher, right? Which is why he teaches to the upper level people, because he can do it through demonstration. They should know what they're looking at, and then he can guide them in seeing alternatives and things like that. And I was confused by that for a long time. But what he means is he doesn't structure classes very well. He doesn't, that's not his forte, right? It's kind of like a data dump. Here you go, right? You figure it out. Okay, cool. All right, fair enough. But the new student wants to know the right way. They want to know like that teacher does this particular kata. Let's say it's Tangeki from the Koto-Ryu Shodan no Maki, right? He does it this way, but he does it slightly different. He does it whatever. Nagato Sensei 1 year in Japan was talking about this. He said, I do this particular kata this way, and Shirai Sensei does it this way, and Seno Sensei does it this way. And Hatsumi Sensei has never said anything about that. So I think that this is right and it's okay. But they're also, focusing on principle where people could be focusing on, because we come out of a Western academic framework, right? Where you're really memorizing formulas and regurgitating data to pass a test more than demonstrating critical thinking and true understanding, right? That's why they want you to show your work, right? So they can see if you're actually using the formula that they taught you, or, God help you if you actually understand numbers well enough that you come up with other ways to get the same freaking answer, and it's not guesswork. Right? But anyway, so but the intermediate phase of training, right? So this is based on that shu-ha-ri model, right? So shu, copy, preserve, right? Whatever the teacher demonstrates, that's what you do. Right? Ha means to break, right? So the ha model is where what most people know of as henka, right? And a lot of people allow for, fall back on, misunderstand, and use it as a crutch, whatever. Henka way too soon, right? Henka has become a way for people with really shitty taijutsu to bullshit their way through because they can't do the technique right. So everything's a henka. But no, it isn't, right? Because it's not a variation on the application of the principles and concepts that make that kata an example of those principles and concepts in action. It's something else. Now, yeah, you still put the guy down, but that doesn't make it a henka. Okay? So either way, right? But at the intermediate stage, it's all about breaking up the models and making variations so that the student can understand the principles and concepts, right? The form is an example. It's a place to start, okay? So in the intermediate stages, the focus isn't on you. You should already know how to move. The reason for the adaptation, the reason for the henka is, what is he doing? Because in the earlier stages, he throws a punch. We say straight punch, we say hook punch or whatever, but we don't necessarily dictate what it is. And whatever's coming in, as long as the uke is throwing it, right, it's too early in a student's training to understand, like to be thinking about everything, right? So here are these standardized kind of things, right? But once you get a handle on those things, then okay, he's throwing a hook punch. what kind of hook punch, right? Is it a big old flailing hook punch? Is it more tight, right? Is he throwing that shoulder in so it does something to the way the arm extends or not as that hook punch comes around, right? Um, there's different there are different hook punches, right? I mean, ultimately, right? Kongo Kai side of things, ultimate universal truth, right? A punch is a punch. Yeah, except there was a class we did a bunch of time ago where I explored 4 variables and for throwing any given strike, and there are 3 variables within those. Okay, variables for things like range and angle and level and things like that, right? And then you have high, mid, low, or you have close, mid, long, as far as range goes, that kind of thing, right? When you combine those 4 variables and the 3 possibilities, right? So let's say it's range, so close, mid, long, whatever, right? When you combine them, you come up with 81 different ways to throw any given fist. But a punch is still a punch. Yeah. However, anyway, but how is that coming in? So the emphasis in the intermediate phases of training should be about him watching how that punch is coming in, because proper naname, proper taisabaki, is to be angled to the line of the attack, which is fucking easy if we're always working off at ski and they all look the same. Well, that's easy to learn. Fantastic. But now he's throwing an uppercut, or he's throwing an upward diagonal upward cut, or he's throwing a lateral one at the ribs instead of the face, or whatever, right? He's just one of these guys that looks like those freaking red balloon guys they put out in front of car dealerships and shit, that there's a fan blowing air up its ass and it just, does this wild kind of crazy thing. There's people out in the world that just kind of throw that shit in there. They look like they look like a machine in a car wash, just flailing shit at you, right? That's very, very different. So how is that coming in? Angled to the line of the attack, but profiled to the attacker. Okay. So now I need to watch that, and I need to train with as many different types of hooks and angles and whatnot as possible, so that the henka side of that is, right, not going to 30 to 45 degrees. I might be going to 90 degrees. I might be going to 270, whatever, right? Where's the opening? Where's the best place to be based on what this kata or what this strategy, which is really what the kata are. The kata are examples of, right, strategies and tactics. So I learned to vary things, right? What if I'm doing Ichimon's no kata, and as I come in, right, he sees that thing coming in and he lifts his shoulder to close off uko so I can't get to it, right? So that's where we might come in this way. And as we see that shoulder lift up, we just kind of shift away and turn the hand over. And if we understand that a shuto coming in this way, right, simply by juxtapositioning for those of you on audio only, you're going to have to go by words, juxtapositioning the ulna and the radial bone, it moves to the other side of his freaking neck. So if you're fighting somebody with a neck, what did I just do? Like that far? If you get a person with a neck bigger than that, that you're in the wrong fight, man. That's like tiny Nikes don't fail me now. Okay. That's right. And besides that, if you can hit if his neck is that big, how tall is this guy? Okay. Shoot him, stab him, step on his big toe, probably the weakest point in his body. Okay. Unless you're wearing sneakers, in which case, like the new shoes, I highly recommend that people try like stomp kicks and toe stabs and all that with different types of shoes. Right? Because you might be surprised that sole that's very shock absorbing protects him during a stomp kick just as much as it protects you when you're stomping down to not get damaged, right? Or close to it. But anyway, so now we got, adjusting to him, and then the next phase up, the advanced phase, right? I know my stuff. See, we're really going through Sun Tzu's Art of War. I know my stuff. I know how to adapt based on his stuff because I had to adapt to different fight styles, different styles of punching, different styles of kicking. I know this is fucking harder, right? This is why this takes longer, right? But and see, this is Hatsumi-Sensei always pointed out how this was different. One of the reasons why this is different from sport martial arts or even street fighting in certain areas. I mean, you have to study how people attack, how different attackers attack in different areas. When my wife and I go on vacation, one of my research things, like she's looking up places to visit and tours and all that. Yeah, I'm looking up not just crime rate, but I'm also looking up what to look out for, those kind of things, right? And I might even, YouTube, or there's other places online where I can look up CCTV cameras to see how these things actually play out, right? I mean, Ninja Information Gatherers. Hopefully I'm living to the lesson. Anyway, so but in the upper levels, it's now I know his stuff, I know my stuff, that kind of thing. So that's really about the rhythm of the fight and understanding this back and forth flow. And some of the things that we've been covering in previous weeks here, really recent weeks, on like countering the counter, right? Where this guy's good enough to freaking stop your technique or to try to counter it. And then you have to counter that. Was it last week that I did the, it was your mistakes, right? Whether it was intentional or not, and your technique was breaking and stuff. And how do you recover from that kind of thing? Because this is about the interchange now. It's not about this ideal. The kata is an ideal. He throws one or two attacks and then you kick his ass. Well, wouldn't that be freaking wonderful, right? But the attacker's probably not a moron. He probably got the jump on us. He probably has the law on his side. That doesn't mean he's a law-abiding citizen, right? But I don't know if you noticed or not, but criminals know the law better than the cops some days, right? Which should never be a thing. But anyway, so it's like this, right? Where there's this back and forth kind of thing. So the ninja has to know, hey-ho, they have to understand the tactics that the attacker uses so that they can mess that up, right? So if we go back to boryaku, overt boryaku things, I already talked about the cutting off his resources or diminishing them or just killing them, right? Messing up the food supply, poisoning the water, that kind of stuff, right? But there's also things like using narrow passes, or even if it's a singular self-defense situation, right? Using doorways, using the terrain and the geography that you're working with, right? The environment that you're in to create bottlenecks. This works especially well with multiple attackers, right? But it also works well against somebody who has or uses techniques or attacks or whatever that take up a lot of space, that require space, right? The big hook puncher, the flailing guy, a lot of taekwondo kicks and things like that, right? That just take up more space, right? So if I force him to have to navigate through narrow places, right? There might be furnishings, and instead of fighting like we're in a boxing ring or whatever, where meet you in the parking lot. I'm going to meet you in the parking lot, right? You're going to find me between two parked cars. Okay, so good luck with that, right? Or especially if he needs more space, right? Because what I want to do is I'm going to create a choke point that he can only get a few resources through, or a few assets, or a few men, or whatever his attack types are, certain types of attacks through that. Because what I'm doing is I'm taking all of his options and minimizing them. So now it's harder for him to do what he wants to do when he wants to do it. And it's easier for me to deal with him because now I know what's coming, right? He can't throw a bunch of these other things, or he can't send 50 guys through or 100 guys through at a time. They can't storm the castle, or they can't storm the area because I forced them through a narrow pass, and they're easier to ambush, one at a time, two at a time, that kind of thing, right? So again, you have to think about how do we do this, right? If I'm in a parking lot, right, and I'm in the open, this guy starts shit, right? How do I bait him, right? And so in the Bansen-Shukai and the Shoninki, and in a lot of these other sources, part of the boryaku is to do certain things, and these are overt, right? But they could kind of cross over. So on the overt side, right, is I could feign a retreat. So I'm in whatever department store, big, thing, Costco, Walmart, whatever you guys have in Australia, whatever, right? But I'm out in the parking lot and there's the rows of cars and they're facing each other, this way or backed in or whatever. But then there's the big space where everybody drives, right? Where they drive. So that's where shit starts. Okay. And so what I do is I feign a retreat, right? Like I'm trying to get away from this guy, but I run between the cars. Okay. Or between, the doors, right? Or the grill, boot, trunk, whatever, right? Into this narrow space where to the average person, it looks like I'm pinning myself down because it's going to be easier to corner me. But what I'm doing is I'm making it harder for somebody who's used to fighting out in the open to do everything that he can do, right? And so there's mirrors, there's all kinds of shit that I can use in there, right? And there's certain angles that I can apply where when he misses, he's skimming his knuckles off of, tempered glass or whatever, right? There's also shit that I can use because if I catch him, right, in between there, yes, I can't do a ganseki nage, probably in between two parked cars. The angle has to be like freaking perfect because it's too easy for him to stick out a hand against something to stop the throw, right? But what if that's not my thing? What if my thing is to do that so he sticks his hand out there so I can punch his hand away and then he loses balance because he was not only jamming me up, but relying on that car or truck door or whatever for stability. So I punch that arm away and his face falls into the thing. And now I can use the contours of the car and whatnot, grab an ear, hair, neck, whatever, and scrape him along those things to use that to get him in place. Okay. So the overt is, right, feigning the retreat, making him chase me. Okay. The hidden part is I want to bring him into a small box where it's easier to knock him up against these things, right? And to force him to fight in an area. It also is part of psychological warfare. It's part of the Kyujutsu Tenkan, right? He thinks that he's cornering me when really, okay? The other thing is if you have a friend or you're in law enforcement, you got a partner or whatever, okay? Who knows? You're in over your head. This guy didn't give a shit. He's a biker, whatever, right? Not all bikers are bad. I mean, I've got lots of biker friends and they're not in biker gangs, right? There's a biker group in our area that I don't know if they're officially like a nonprofit, but they do fundraisers and stuff all the time for single parent homes and kids that need help. They also have this buddy system where they'll go and it's almost like the Big Brother Big Sister program, if anybody remembers that, where they'll go and help teens that are distressed or don't think they have any other options or whatever. Because the guys I know in these things, they work in factories and they work in lots of other places, but a lot of them are lawyers and doctors and whatnot. They just ride bikes and they've got their leathers and jeans and biker boots and all that kind of stuff. It's their persona when they do that. That's a really, really cool thing, right? But anyway, right, and you have to kind of back in between things, right? So the tactic here is you're a decoy, okay? Or there's other ways to apply the decoy idea, okay? I'll tell you one. I've already told my wife, right? My wife is a decoy, right? Not just because, guys might want to go after the girl, but my wife's joints crack and pop. Like you would have, it's like she's walking on freaking bubble wrap some days. Okay. So I already told my wife, right? Baby, I love you. You're the distraction. The first time I told her, she didn't get it. I said, so, if we need to get away from people, you go that way. I'm going this way. She's like, you would leave me behind. No. See, you pop and crack. And so you're going to go that way. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to wait until they go past where I'm waiting because they're coming after the sound. And now I get to come up from behind them. Right. So sometimes, right, it's not a good idea to have your friend who's got bad joints or cracking knuckles or they've got a cold, right? Or they're friggin' clueless when it comes to their surroundings, right? Not a good idea to have them right next to you. You can protect them from a different angle and they'll actually be safer that way, right? Because if they're next to you, then the bad guys know where you are. And now you have to deal with things directly on, right? And from an overt perspective, we've already covered this in the past. The ninja rarely, I'm going to say rarely, right, engages directly head on, right? It's always indirect engagement. When it's not, you're either the sacrificial lamb and the rest of them are going to, the rest of your team is going to get them, or you're the bait, or you have no other choice. Okay. So again, there's a lot more to these. And so if we can look into our techniques, we can look into our kata, but also we need to look outside of that as well, because unless you live in a place where there's lots of drive-bys and a bunch of bullshit happening, or the riffraff are taking over the neighborhood and stuff, we live in we don't live in a feudal era. We don't live in a time where the bandits literally control the roads, and going from point A to point B every day is like the lottery, right? Am I going to get home or not, kind of thing, right? So, right, and most of us are not living in war-torn areas, right? I do have friends and I do have students that are living in such areas, right? I have one student that lives near the West Bank. I have, and shit happens, right, on a regular basis, right? Even more than ends up being in, our Western news. So, and when I say them aside, I'm not dismissing my friends. What I'm talking about is for the rest of us, we have to come to grips with, like, there are challenges and attacks and dangers, we'll call it, right? Adversity, okay? Because that's what ninjutsu is really about, right? Handling and overcoming adversity. Most people think it's about avoiding adversity. That's so far away from the definition or even the implications. Right? They'd certainly try to avoid it in training. Oh, only soft training. Really? My instructions before everything shifted over to that kind of stuff, and there's time for soft training. However, before that, this wasn't just in the West. This was training with the master teachers and Hatsumi-Sensei. The point of the training was that your training should be harder than anything in the world you would ever encounter, which would make your ability to handle real world stuff a veritable cakewalk. Okay? So, but anyway, we have to consider that there's more shit going on, that these physical skills are not going to be the thing unless we want to end up in the ER before we go to jail, or directly to jail, or in a morgue or whatever. Okay? So, I'm having an argument with somebody and I decide, throat punch him and that'll handle it. Well, probably. However, ... Who protects your family after that? Okay? So the ninja's boryaku, right? Remember, Heiho military tactics. We're talking about battlefield. We're talking about overt warfare, right? And managing that kind of thing so we can stay in the fight longer, reinforce our assets and resources or supplies, so that at the end of the day, the one who has the most shit left over in people and supplies and whatnot wins. And now we get to take the other side's shit. Okay. That's hey-hole. Okay. How do I do that? Boryaku is strategically assessing a situation and choosing the proper strategy that allows you to control things, preferably unseen, right? So poisoning a water supply, right, a water channel from upstream, they don't see that coming, right? Same thing with introducing something, rats, whatever, into the food supply, whatever, right? Send somebody in, or take this poison that we've created and whatnot and sprinkle it over shit, right? First couple of people start throwing up and dying. Everybody else is like, don't eat that. Don't eat that shit. What do we have left to eat? Oh, okay. So ambush things, right? So the reason for bringing them through choke points is to create ambushes, right? And they're literally hit and run tactics. So it's not like we're going to come down and clash swords and ching, ching, ching. Maybe, but that's not the point. The point is, right, we bring them into the choke point so it's easier to take them out because, again, I've covered this in the past. In Ninjutsu, you secrecy of the clan, right? Or in today's world, right? The My family, including the dojo family, right? I've told people in the past that thought it was cool, so they wear their jikatabi out around, and usually they're teenagers or young 20 somethings, and I have to make a not so veiled threat, right? And I don't mean that I'm going to beat their ass or whatever, right? But I have to remind them that in what do we have now, 21st century America, all tabi prints lead back to warrior concepts, Mori no Todo Dojo. So if the cops show up here, they're going to be the least of your concerns. But guess what? You're going to go along, because if somebody's screwing around, and this is why in our membership documentation, there's a thing that they have to initial off of and sign that they will faithfully comply with the rules of the dojo and the traditions of the martial art. That's a really polite way of saying you're a representative of this group, of this dojo, and the way you act and carry yourself out in the world. Anybody that knows you, knows of your activities, and knows of your connection with us will automatically assume that the rest of us are just like that. Okay. Well, it's not really secrecy. Yeah, kind of, right? Because if one of my students or one of my instructors does dumbass shit and I don't go, yes, officer, I don't know what to tell you. However, right, here's class. If I do dumbass stuff, then I have possibly an investigation and surveillance on the dojo, on other people that have done nothing wrong. What it's just no, right? So in the Bushido world, right, the warrior makes a name for themselves. It's about valor and honor, and like everybody knows. In the ninjas world, everything is done to protect the identity, location, whatever of the family, right? My family, okay. We just we did this during Daikomyo-sai, right? Where we did techniques in a way where they were disoriented before, during, or after, and couldn't properly identify us. So, right, there was no way to, oh, that looked like that Jeff Miller guy, and I know he lives over here and whatever, right? That's just bringing bad shit to my doorstep, right? And whether I'm willing to sacrifice myself because I think I'm that tough, that I can handle a couple of guys in the prison shower, which is not my thing, right? I already told guys in the dojo, and I've got a couple of corrections officers. I'm like, my plan is if things ever go sideways, as soon as I go inside, I'm punching the first guard or tough guy and being thrown in solitary. And then when it's time to get out of that, I'm going to do it again because that's the safest place in the whole thing, right? Because last thing I need is for a bunch of tough guys who don't give a shit about anything and have zero value for their own lives, let alone mine, is for them to find out I'm an ex-cop and I've got this quadrillion degree, as my grandson would say, gazillion, bajillion, whatever. Um, high level black belt. Or, I mean, nothing like painting a freaking bullseye on your back, right? So there's that, right? Secrecy and survival, right? Long term survival. So these ambush things are going to come in from like flanking directions and whatnot very, very quickly. Take out a bunch or lob some arrows in there, whatever, right? Bring them into the pass and then light fires or whatever. Okay, it's the same thing in the techniques. Okay, how do I do these things to keep from and do them in a way that this guy doesn't find out where I live and have access to my friends and family, because I'm gonna have a hard time if I'm being targeted. I'm gonna have a hard time looking over my own goddamn shoulders every hour of every day, let alone looking over every member of my family and or friends or students that I care about. Because if they can't get at you, right? So it's imperative in Ninjutsu that they can't identify you, right? First of all, you need to be able to escape, which is where we're going to lead next. Because again, boryaku, there's a bunch of things that we've covered recently in the past. Those of you who come to class, we've covered that actually fall under this heading, and most of Togakure-Ryu falls under boryaku, right? It's very difficult to separate the individual strategies from the literal secret of secrets that was guarded by the Togakure ninja with their lives, right? When Obu Nobunaga attacked Togakushi, that whole region, right? And his edict was to wipe out every living being, man, woman, and child. Okay. So those who could evacuate did. Those who stayed to buffer time to allow them to get away did that. And other ones who, kind of got caught in the crossfire, they committed suicide and they killed their children because of this stuff that had to be protected, right? Because if the enemy got a hold of these tactics and strategies, not only could they use them, but they could develop defenses against them, right? So this is really where the day-to-day kind of stuff comes in, because the ninja's boryaku accounts for things like making friends or allies, or entering into things, or understanding trends and day-to-day happenings in the world, so you can use them, right, to forge alliances or to break up alliances, to control somebody's needs, thoughts, or actions. Okay. Nothing like either making a friend by discussing in a favorable way the political candidate that they're supporting or the religion that they're a part of, regardless of what my focus is. Right? There's nothing quite like driving people into incoherent or irrational thought by speaking well, right, and or making fun of. If I speak well of the opposing candidate, if I find out that they loathe them, right, they just think that anybody who would vote for them is just absolutely fucking batshit crazy, right? If I want this person to become irrational, right, because they default to that I don't understand kind of thing, or they default to, anger, disgust, whatever, right? That's going to blind them to clarity. Then I'll say, oh, absolutely. Are you freaking nuts? You're voting for who? That retard? Oh man. Okay. But understanding those things. Okay. You can do the same thing with, depending on what their hot points are, right? And again, we've talked about the psychological warfare in the past, where we talked about the needs and the weaknesses. There's 5 needs and 5 weaknesses. If you know what any given person or group holds dear or is afraid of, they hold that dear, and you offer to make that easier for them. Okay, now you're in. If it's a weakness and or a fear, and you offer to protect them from that, or take it away from, or you take the problem away, or to save them from it, right? Um, they'll do whatever you want, okay, because they need you. They can't do it for themselves. And when you run into resistance, you just threaten to take that away. Okay. Now, again, this makes the ninja seem like they're just cold. They have no morals. They have no ethics. But if you read the Banzen Shukai or the Shuninki, any of these things, right, there is a huge emphasis on loyalty, responsibility, the truth, those kind of things, right? Because you have to understand the difference between who you are as a person and how you're acting to either jam up or stop or otherwise damage or whatever somebody who's causing problems. Um, the reason that you would be using these techniques and tactics. Okay, I go into this a little bit in the Seishin Teki Kyoyo book. It's going to be a digital book to start, but into that there, and then expand on it in the bigger program, where uh, the ninja's approach to loyalty and those kind of things, right? Because in the samurai's world, that's an external kind of thing, right? It's a cultural expectation. Your job is to protect the status quo, right? But for a ninja, right? When do I use that? With who do I use that? Right. So with friends and family, I always tell them, right? Uh, if I'm using this on you, 2 things are true. One, I'm burning bridges and we're done. And 2, you will never know that I'm using it. Right. So I don't use these things again. I don't use the negative application of these things uh, against friends and students and loved ones and whatnot. Will I apply them at a lower degree if I need the student to get past their own anxiousness, resistance, prior programming, whatever, so that they can get over themselves to do what needs to be done to move to the next level? Absolutely. Absolutely. Right? But it's about them, not about me, not doing the manipulation because I'm getting something. Right? So there's a huge difference in the application. So, when we talk about these boryaku tactics, it can be easy to think that just like the samurai wrote and professed about, right? These people, they have no morals, they have no ethics, they will post their allegiance to whoever pays them the most or whatever. Nothing could be further from the truth. Okay. Um, but this is where the nimpo comes in, right? There's a 3-part. It's not really a poem. It's a 3-part lesson kind of thing that I read. Was it at the end of Daikomyosai, James? We focused on Togakure-Ryu and some of the secrets during this past Daikomyosai. The 3-part about the perseverances, right? I think it was Daikomyosai. I think it was at the very end. Right. The quote from one of the sources is to endure adversity by injuring the enemy, but keeping yourself safe and uninjured is the best perseverance, or a good perseverance, I guess, a good perseverance. To endure adversity or danger by injuring your enemy while also injuring yourself or allowing yourself to be injured is a poor perseverance. Okay? So this nose to nose, toe to toe, let's see what happens kind of bullshit, not the ninja way. And then the third part is to endure or escape danger or adversity by neither injuring the opponent nor allowing yourself to be injured is a fair perseverance. So, de-escalating things, you both go home safely, that kind of thing, right? It creates a stalemate. So it's middle level kind of thing, but it's fair as in not fair like, oh, that was fair, right? Not that kind of thing, right? It's fair as in it's okay, because at least it puts a gap in there. You can prepare better. You can, think about how that worked and kind of negotiate things, and then maybe it goes back to the negotiating table, or you just agree to disagree, or like the Korean War that a lot of my friends are always surprised about because I'm listed as a veteran of the Korean War. Well, how's that possible, Sensei? You're not fucking old enough. Yeah, well, the Korean War is not over. Okay. Well, yeah, it is. No, there was never a peace treaty signed. There was an armistice signed. An armistice is an agreement to stop shooting at each other. That's not the same thing as a peace treaty. So, technically, legally, by international law, the Korean War for the U.S. is not over. It's never ended. That's an important thing to know, especially if you're watching out for dangers in the world. Okay? And if somebody ever takes that seriously on the other side, shit'll change in a day. Okay? So, again, right? How does this stuff kind of work out, right? So, but the higher we go up the chain, Chunin, Jonin level ninja, not that the Geinin didn't use them, but the Geinin used these tactics temporarily on a mission, right? To accomplish something, get the information back home, that kind of thing. But the higher up the chain, the more the ninjutsu, the more the things are hidden, right? They can't be overt, because if they're overt, then you got bigger problems and stuff, especially if you're a Jonin, who should be the most secret, hidden, unknown member of a ninja clan, society, group, whatever, right? And then also the Chunin become endangered because for every one of them, there's how many operatives. Think about the clandestine organizations today, right? But this really leads into, and we've covered this in the past. I'm thinking about doing one on the Tonko no Jutsu, but the deeper we go into this, the hidden side, right, is the Tonko no Jutsu, which is the escape, evasion, survival, all that kind of stuff, right? So you've got the Gogyo, the Ura Gogyo, or the Gotonpo, the Ura Gotonpo, which are the obvious use of the 5 Chinese elements, nuanced applications of them, and then you've got the Tento Jupo, right, which are the 10 categories of elements and the use of different elements in nature, right, to hinder and get things done and whatnot, right? But then there's all kinds of other things that get added to this, right? There's the sun, sheen, the Sanshin. I can't remember the last part of it. This is not the Sanshin that most people know of as those 5 techniques and whatnot. This is a 3 levels, Tenshi Jin levels to apply, right, to those 10. And now you've got 30 of these things, or whatever. Anyway, to wrap this up, and where I was taking this to think like a ninja, once you understand the ninpo, and that's those 3 statements that I made about the good, poor, and fair perseverance, that comes out of something called the ninpo of ninjutsu. Okay? So what we're looking at is the hidden side, the ura side of things, right? And so if you understand what I just did with those numbers, and even if you don't, it's okay. In all of the Tonko Ninjutsu, right? This is the secret of secrets within the Togakure-Ryu, right? These are all of the symbolic, overt, covert, use of nature, all kinds of things to create these different tactics that are being used in the boryaku, right? In different ways, right? Are we out? Is it a battlefield kind of thing? Is it an overt, home invasion, whatever? Or are we, trying to get a group that we're working with? I'm a part of an organization or a club or whatever, and we just can't get people to see eye to eye. And so I approach things from a certain angle that everybody sees it as a win for themselves by doing it a certain way that wasn't necessarily their idea or their preference. Oh, by the way, that approach, right? Again, I didn't name the principles and whatnot because that's contextually based and based on the person or the club or the group or the entity that you're dealing with, right? It's not a glove. It's not a one size fits all, right? So that same thing I just described with a club also works on individuals, and a parent can use it on a adolescent, on a teenager who only has a couple of 1 or 2, right, answers to handling common everyday things. I know they're on TikTok. Well, not anymore. Maybe here in this country. Or whatever, social media, and they all think they freaking know everything, but their world is really, really freaking small. And they haven't encountered a whole bunch of shit stains because mom and dad handles that stuff. So, right. So that leads to, just like living in a relatively peaceful time where there's groups, police officers, clandestine or overt or whatever, that are keeping the boogeyman at bay. So people live in peaceful times are free to come up with all kinds of bullshit ideologies that they wouldn't be able to do if they lived in a different place, time, era, social construct, culture, whatever. Okay. So, but again, understanding the context. But really what you end up with through these multiple layers is this mu, right? This emptiness, but not like a vacuum. It's this return to zero where you use everything. You're able to use everything, right? There's no, the official way to do things is the application of strategic thinking to create, by skillful means, an answer to the problem to produce the results as quickly, as effectively, as efficiently as possible with the least amount of wear and tear on yourself as possible, right? And when I say wear and tear, we're also talking about people knowing that you did it, okay? What I was introduced to in 1980, 81 as a goal for the ninja, right? There's 2 things. One was at the advanced level of this clarity, the Seishin Teki, and I don't know that this is part of the book. I don't want to keep throwing things at it because I can always do a course or a follow-up kind of thing, is the attainment of Shinshin Shingon. Shinshin Shingon is the mind and eyes of God. That doesn't make you a god. What it means is you understand what things really are: person, place, thing, activity, situation, experience, whatever. And you understand how things really work. Okay. And so you're able to navigate things a whole lot easier. Right. And that is the way you handle adversity. Right. If I'm not swimming upstream or trying to do things where in a way that I'm just not strong enough for that downstream current that's going to just bash me up against rocks and shit, then I can stay the course longer and get things done much easier. Right. So that's on one side, Shishishingon. Right. On the other side is the ability to work one's will without apparent action. What that means is you're able to get things done and nobody knows that you did it. Or nobody knows. If they even suspect that you did it, they have no idea how. Okay. So this stuff, the difference between ninpo applied to warriorship to get to a certain point and the conventional kind of thing, there's personal development on both sides. Okay. But the reason for the development of specific skills, very different. Okay. So what this really forces us to do, if we're focusing on this boryaku, this strategy, this which way is the best way, this clarity, right? Again, boryaku and seishin. Seishin is what keeps you a good person, keeps a positive light in your heart, that kind of thing, but allows you to walk in and apply the tools of what we might call darkness. And I know how this is starting to sound woo-woo, right? It allows you to do that without losing yourself, right? Because you're not doing these things, and you won't do these things against people that, you know, it's not the it's the opposite of the what was written in samurai journals and whatnot about, you know, the ninja being godless, lawless. That my most recent reading, and I take these things in small chunks, in the Bansenchukai, in the Seishin section, there's actually two Seishin sections, Seishin 1, Seishin 2. There's a lot of references to like Chinese references and whatnot, because this is where the stuff came from, right? There's a lot of these statements that if you misuse this stuff, if you use it for the wrong reasons and whatnot, right? Neither the gods nor the Buddhas will save you, right? You're gonna. So there's all these references that if you're not on the inside, but then again, you know, do you want to be? Because a lot of folks, right, they got involved in this stuff for non-ninja reasons, and I can understand how over the years, very early on, Hatsumi-Sensei stopped making references to ninjutsu, and then people mistranslated that as we don't do ninjutsu. It was very strategic, right? His application of boryaku and allowing people to believe certain things. I think I covered this in a previous thing, where at least one of three primary reasons was it opened things up to more people who were interested in the martial arts with this allure of personal power and that kind of thing, which is cool. It's there, right? Without scaring them by discussing things like Mikyo and Kuji and you know, Intonjutsu and a bunch of these other things that the average person was taught by mom and grandma a long time ago, very early on, that, you know, if you do that, you're a bad person. So it allowed for bringing more people in at a certain level, and then literally vetting students, right? Tossing out a lesson every once in a while, or a certain book, or whatever, so that right people could use that. And there's also stopgaps in this stuff as well. But the whole idea with this, that to sum up all of these things, right, points to boryaku, right? If we could boil this down to one thing that would be easy to work on beginning today, tomorrow, right, is to be a much better strategic thinker, to look at things like if there's a problem that you're working on. This is actually a practical exercise in the Seishin Teki book. Very, very simple. It's just a 1 or 2 liner kind of thing. Think about a problem that you're encountering right now, and what you're normally, or what the first thoughts are about how to solve it, right? And then expand your vision a little bit and start looking at, okay, if I did it this way, what could that lead to in the aftermath long term? What could that produce shockwave wise? So now you're going to have to take into account people who live around you, or that you work with, or you live with, or whatever, and how this is going to do that, right? And so, right, sometimes I gotta, this is the quickest, easiest way, but that's going to create some shockwaves. So by knowing that, I can do this maybe in smaller steps, or I can do it already prepared for, or maybe I already enter into negotiations with my allies. Are you hearing what sounds like battlefield tactics, right? Or ancient warfare things? I'm going to enter into negotiation with my allies or potential allies, right? Spouse, kids, friends, coworkers, boss, whatever, right? President of the club, you're whatever, right? And explain the logic and what's going to happen, what I have to do, and explain the logic to minimize or eliminate the shockwaves in those directions. And if I do it properly, those allies, when other ones pop up that I couldn't foresee, right, or I thought one person was going to be way okay and understand it, and all of a sudden, right, now they feel threatened or whatever, right? These other people can come in as allies to calm them down, to so they can explain it and whatnot, so I can stay focused on solving the problem, right? This is a very, very different way of thinking. This is while I am doing it, it's not just about me, and it's not a two-dimensional do this or don't do this kind of thing. It's being like the general. Oh, and by the way, in the Bansen Shukai, the Jonin term is often that term isn't used. The term that's used is general. So again, you can get lost in these terms, but again, during the era and whatever, right? But so what this really comes down to, right? Boryaku, thinking as a ninja. The title of this episode is really about having as many options and tactics and whatnot that allow you to adapt to and handle a bigger and bigger or broader set of adversities, challenges, problems, and whatnot across the board, so that you're not limited to only 1 or 2 choices whenever something happens. Okay? Oh, and the first part of all this, going back to Seishin, right, is learning the lessons that allow you to get you out of your way. Whatever those things are that, right, those fears, those weaknesses, those needs and whatnot that keep us in defensive or offensive mode. Or victim mode, whatever. Okay, so it's one thing to look one way because you're working on something and in a way so as to not have people overtly throw roadblocks at you because they're trying to stop you for whatever reason. And being that way and saying that you're doing it a certain way, but what was really going on the inside is I don't believe that I have that kind of personal power because of the man, because of whatever, right? It's that blame game kind of thing. In that case, this nor anything else will ever help. Okay? Which is why Seishin Teki, and I know there's other lists that put Seishin Teki Kyoyo at the bottom of the list or whatever, but all the lists that I have and were given in the very beginning, Seishin Teki Kyoyo for the ninja leads the list because this is what allows you to do all of those other things from a position of justice and rightness and loyalty and honor, all those kind of things, right? And not from a position of it's fucking my way or the highway, and I'm way okay with manipulating the shit out of people because all that matters is that I get. That's a sociopath, right? That's the used car salesman mentality. That's the con man kind of thing. This is not that, but it's very difficult to see that if you're not looking for ninpo, if you're not trapped, or if you are trapped in one aspect of what people call ninjutsu, right? The ninpo taijutsu, but you don't even call it that. You're calling it budo taijutsu, which is fine. You start off with budo taijutsu, but at a certain stage, you're still pretty much thinking about things the way everybody else is. And God help you if you encounter somebody that understands strategy or somebody that's coming at you from the same system that you learned. Okay. So, anyway, that's what I have, right? Boryaku, the trait behind it, regardless of what we're talking about is battlefield or whatever, for a ninja, Boryaku is strategic thinking. Okay? It is the ability to use anything and everything at your disposal based on your assessment and strategy, which is your outcome, what you're desiring, right? To have a asset to problem match. Okay? And if you can do it, regardless of whether people know about it, that's a first step. When you can do it and nobody knows that you did it, or people stand there and watch you, you look like a freaking magician because they still have no idea what you just did. Okay. That's okay. And if you can do it and they're standing in front of you, but they can't even see that you're doing it, it just kind of happened. That's very different. Okay. So we're all warriors. Ninpo is Budo, but it takes into account psychological warfare, not just battlefield stuff, right? Quelling arguments. When we say using it politically, I don't mean you have to be involved in friggin' state, local, or whatever politics. You put two people in a room and you end up with politics because they have, at some point in some area, conflicting viewpoints that they're going to argue about. That's politics. It's not what people think of because they're thinking of governing and they're thinking of legal things and leadership and stuff like that, right? But opposing viewpoints about a thing, about how it should be solved or how it should be done or whatever, you only need two people. If you need less than that, then that's a multiple personality disorder. So, and the more people you have involved, the bigger it gets. So, right, knowing politically, if two people are at odds and I need them to work together, then one of the easiest things to do is to insert a common enemy to both of them. And that may be somebody else that they both know that I remind them both of, or this person is doing something over here you might want to pay attention to. And so, whether they like each other or not, they're almost forced to band together to protect themselves against this other person or to do whatever they need to do. But sometimes that common enemy is me, because my goal is for them to work together like my kids. I'm having a problem. They won't work it out. I've tried the overt things. So while this looks overt, right? It's an overt attack, but they don't understand what the attack really was. So, right? He's doing this, she's doing that, right? They're telling on because they're trying to get me to pick sides and punish the other one or get them to stop or whatever. And I go, you know what? You're both grounded. Go to your individual rooms. You're done. Right? Or it's even better if they share the same room or, go living room. You sit in that chair. You sit in that chair. Don't talk. And then I leave the room. What are they going to do? After they stop mumbling at each other, they're going to be reminding each other. Or if I, overhear them talking, I said no to, right? Eventually I become the bad guy. And then they'll enter into negotiations to work out how to get over that grounding because, right, neither one's getting off the hook. So this is Ninjutsu is not a just show me where to put my foot kind of thing. And it is applicable to everything. One of my guys, I don't know if he wants me to mention him or not, he happens to be in law enforcement. He has used many of these tactics to go across different jobs and in those jobs. Okay. That's cool shit. Absolutely. Okay. So, James, let's open this up quickly. Questions, comments, complaints. Sensei, you're an asshole. Whatever. If it serves my purpose, absolutely.
The only comment that's come in was earlier from Dave. He said, Ganseki Ori, to fit him between the cars, you can make him feel tired. LOL.
I can make him feel more than tired. Jesus Christ. Ganseki Ori, the base version of that I was taught is you're either snapping his knee joint or you're snapping his elbow. And if he doesn't pass out, I'm just going to hold on to one of those limbs or tag it every chance I get. See, that's overt stuff, right? Where you're not working strength, right? You attack the weakest point. And if it's Ganseki Ori, let's say I break the elbow, or we were talking about that big guy, right? Where I can't hit him. He's too tall. His neck is this freaking big, whatever, right? And I said, stomp on his big toe. Okay. Now, he's probably really pissed off now. He can still stand fairly well. He's not going to move any faster or slower than he moved before, right? And he wants to grab me and all that. Okay. Well, it's okay, right? Letting him grab me and pull me in, not a bad idea. If I still have access to that big toe and can keep bumping into it. Or once I break that elbow, what's the weak point? The weak point's still the same. It only takes what? 12 to 15 pounds of pressure per square inch to blow out an elbow. It's 65 for a knee. Okay. But once I break something on somebody, I don't care if it's the bone of the back of the hand, I did it off an uke-uchi, right? I'm going to keep a hold of that hand, and every time he freaking moves, I'm going to go, that's broken. That's broken. Right? Shake it around and all that until he freaking blacks out. Right? Because I don't need strength. I don't need a lot of nuance and cool technique and all that. I just need to identify a weak point so I can attack it. And then if that doesn't end it, then I just attack the weak point as if it were everything. Because eventually the system will just shut down. Okay. And now if he's jacked on drugs and all that, and he can't feel pain, and that's not going to put him into shock, well, then I just disjoint things to the point where the body doesn't function to get at me. But that doesn't take a lot of strength. What most people are doing is this big old overt, I'm going to beat him into the ground, because that's right. That's caveman with style, right? I need to find the weakest point, right? A simple study, Grey's Anatomy, or even simpler, to understand how easy it is for the ears to come off, or to tear a lip, or to, like I said, break a metacarpal, metatarsal, hand bone, foot bone, the elbow, the knee, whatever. People learn gyakute like it's supposed to be a throw. No. Gyakute are taught the way they are in the initial stages of training so that the uke can take ukemi. As we go up through the levels, we need to be learning more about that, because the point is to apply the technique to lock him and prevent him from taking ukemi. That doesn't mean I don't throw him. That just means he can't save himself. And then the better I get at that, I need to be at a point where when I take it, I can also release it midway, because my goal is to get to a point where my uke can't save himself. And at the moment I realize that, I need to be able to save him. So now I have the yin and the yo, the yin and the yang of that technique. I can destroy with it, or I can apply it in a way that very clearly affects his head and his heart, but I can give him back his life. It's like a shallow pond, right? This isn't really deep shit. I mean, it's just, anyway. So, just my opinion from doing this for a couple of weeks. Anyway, anything else, James?
The only other thing was from Merrill. He said, awesome Kuden.
Thanks. All right. If there's nothing else, like I said, I will get out the dates to spring and fall camp so people can be preparing ahead of time. Also, if anybody is interested in hosting a seminar in your area, you can reach out. What would be best, James? Info at Warrior Concepts online.com. Yeah, would that be best?
That works.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so just send an email to info@warrior-concepts-online.com, and we can discuss things. I have done a bunch of these things from ground level, like when I was a white belt, right? Bringing instructors to another country because it was difficult for me to go to them. So, and I have a fairly large email list and all that kind of stuff, which means that there are people already in your area or close to where you are, and it would be more convenient for them to show up at a thing where you are than to come all the way to where I am. So if you're interested in at least discussing how that would work, shoot me an email, and in the subject line, let's put like seminar info or something like that. Or is that too confusing with info about our seminars at the dojo? What would be better, James? That would stand out for us. Seminar host. Yeah, let's do that. Seminar host. Right. Yeah. So, I can help with organizing. You'll have to be the boots on the ground where you are, but I can help with a bunch of stuff that people who've never done this before, need to know or whatever. Right. So, everything from how to find venues to what we're going to be teaching and how to get the word out and all that kind of stuff. Okay. So, and the way my process works is it shouldn't cost the host anything. Okay. If it does, we did something drastically wrong. Okay. All right. So that's the only other big thing I have. The Seishin Teki Kyoyo book will be out. I have to finish it. There's some editing I have to do on the audio stuff for the add-on program for anybody that wants that. And I also have to finalize the pages that will have the information and where you can order stuff. And I say order it, I mean, the initial thing is going to be in digital format. So once you order it, you'll have it. That being said, the folks in my platinum level inner circle distance program and my Shinobi Kai people, you can click on it and buy it if you want. You're just contributing to MVF, which is my favorite charity, which is Miller's Vacation Fund. Because sometimes I need a vacation. Anyway, but it will be because of the level that your coaching program is at, it'll be just inserted into your dashboard area. So we'll let you know when that's done and ready as well. Okay. James, where are we on the folks that pre-ordered the Daikomyo-sai videos? Another couple of days?
At most, I just populated the page. I just need to double check.
Okay.
Make sure everything's good and make sure it's assigned correctly. Then we'll be good. Cool.
So those of you who pre-ordered the Daikomyo-sai video recordings, there you go. Another day or three, right? Once he finalizes those things, then an email will go out. You'll know. You can, if you're already in the system with that means you bought something that you have access to or whatever, and you're in the system, you have log-on information into onlineninjaacademy.com. You'll just need your confirmation when you sign in. If I have this right, James, when they sign in, they'll land on their dashboard page and there'll be that option that they have access to it, right?
Right.
And those who don't will get an email from the system that will tell you what your login and your password is. You can change the password after you're in, but you'll need to do that before you can access or before you can go through the login stuff. So you'll need that information. Okay, so you'll get a second email, one that everything is ready, and then once he has you plugged into the system, that automatically generates, right? That automatically sends out the access email.
Right.
Cool beans. All right. If there are no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I will talk to everybody again, hopefully on Wednesday. Wednesday, we're going to be diving into a little something from this boryaku, but as applicable to physical self-defense techniques. So on the strategy and tactics side, and then, of course, that'll springboard us off into the Friday class, which will demonstrate the stuff in physical form. Okay. So that's it. If I don't see you during Whiteboard Wednesday, then there's always Friday. And if not, well, I'll see you next week on the next episode of KUDEN. Good night, everybody. Get more of KUDEN Radio, subscribe through your favorite podcasting site, or join our clan of serious modern warriors at online